normal. This is not my spacious office. This is actually the entrance and the hallway. If you've driven by the governor's mansion recently, you may have noticed scaffolding all around the area. This building is about 120 years old. And with that comes some much needed changes and repairs. Unfortunately, the windows in this building have to be replaced or treated. Over time, the wood around them has rotted away, and so this is something that was supposed to be done many years ago, but they've been saving up to make it happen, and finally it's happening this year. So there are 103 windows in this building, and all of them are being removed. And so I'm staying in the basement while that happens, and they'll be doing that work. But we are in the hallway, and excited to be able to answer some questions tonight. We appreciate so many of you who have sent questions into us and made it possible for us to have this meeting here tonight. So I want to start right away with a call that I had earlier today. We're getting more and more used to these type of virtual calls, Zoom calls, Facebook Live, but today I was asked by the White House to participate in a call with President Biden to talk about vaccines. They chose 6 governors from across the country, 3 Democrats and 3 Republicans who have had very successful vaccine rollout campaigns, and we were fortunate, thanks to the hard work of so many here in Utah, to be chosen as one of those governors to share the successes that we've had and some of the big ideas that we've had. Really, we've now vaccinated, we've now distributed over 2 million vaccines so far. That's first and second doses. We have close to 90% of those over the age of 65 who have already received 1 dose, and we're getting closer to 60% of adults in Utah who have received their first dose. And so we had a chance to talk about what we're doing there, some of the public service campaigns, the public information campaigns that we've been running to help people understand why it's so important to get vaccinated so we can get back to normal. It's incredible what's happening with our case counts right now in Utah. We had plateaued for a few weeks, but over the past 2 weeks they've started dropping again more than 10% every week, and that's just really good news, and it's all because more and more people are getting vaccinated. So thanks to all of you who have been doing that. It was fun to share with the rest of the nation some of the great things that are happening. We have our mobile vaccine clinics now. Any organization can request a mobile vaccine to come to them. So think about your business, churches, nonprofit, volunteer organizations. You can request to have a mobile vaccine site come directly to you and vaccinate all of your employees that want to, or your service members, your church congregations, and that's been very successful. We've had over 200 requests for that now, as we're trying to make it more convenient. We also had an announcement from the president today that Uber and Lyft will give free vaccine rides to anyone that wants one. If you're going to a vaccination center, you can get a free ride. Most of our vaccine clinics are now walk-in. You don't need an appointment. You can walk in at any time. We have hundreds of sites available all across the state, and we're making it easier than ever to get your vaccine. So we're excited about that. Just trying to see if we've missed anything else. Oh, I also told him that I thought it was important that the White House and others model what it's like when you are actually fully vaccinated. You shouldn't have to do all the things that you did before. You shouldn't have to wear a mask everywhere and when you're outside with people and around other vaccinated people. There are so many things that we can do, and President Biden agreed that they could do a better job of being a little less cautious, following the science, and being able to do the things, show that you can do the things that everyone wants to do by getting your vaccine. So I was excited with that. And so now we're going to take some questions. Again, I appreciate people who have sent in their questions. We're ready to go. So the first one comes from Emma on Facebook. And Emma asks, how can we improve education and teacher retention in our state? Thank you, Emma. It's been a rough year for teachers across our state and across our nation. I know because I have a brother who is a teacher. We talk about this all the time. I still have 2 kids in public school. And I've seen firsthand how dedicated our teachers have been in the most difficult of year. We're one of the few states that was able to have kids get in-person learning for most of the school year, and that's been a big deal, but again, also a very challenging one. So what can we do? Well, I think there's several things that we can do to keep our teachers in the profession. Unfortunately, we have a teacher shortage in this country, and that's true here in Utah. We lose almost half our teachers in the first 5 years of their profession for lots of different reasons, but there are a couple. One, of course, is teacher pay. We need to make sure that this can be a career for teachers, that you can raise a family on a teacher's salary, and we're working to increase teacher pay. We had historic investments in education spending this year, and much of that will go to teachers. We had the first time ever we had teacher bonuses that to help our teachers through this very difficult pandemic year. Really excited that those checks are going out to our teachers, and so that's one. But as I traveled around the state, what I found out was I thought teacher pay would be the biggest issue. It was actually the second biggest issue. The largest issue for teachers, and the reason we're losing them, is that we've taken the joy out of teaching in a couple ways. We continue to over-regulate the classroom instead of allowing our teachers to do what they do best, and that's teach. So we have so much paperwork and reporting requirements. We have hundreds of reporting requirements for teachers and school districts. Many of which are duplicative or completely unnecessary. So we're trying to peel back those regulations. We have high stakes testing and school grading and things that aren't making our kids any smarter, but are certainly making it more difficult for our teachers. And so we're working with the legislature and the state school board to find ways to improve the atmosphere around teaching. I hate it when I hear teachers say that they're telling their own kids that they don't want them to go into teaching. We want to make teaching a career destination for people again, and we're well on our way. So my hearty congratulations to teachers across the state. Thank you for what you're doing. We love you and we appreciate you. And next year is going to be even better. I made it very clear with several announcements over the past couple weeks that there will be no masks in the fall, that we will be done with that as the school year is ending right now. And I think that was welcome to our teachers and especially our students and my kids. I think we're all ready to be done with masks, and as we continue to improve and more vaccines are available in the state, more and more people are getting vaccinated, that will make things even better. And a big announcement from the FDA that they have approved the Pfizer vaccine only for those ages 12 to 15 who were not eligible thus far. And we anticipate that the final approval with the CDC will happen tomorrow, and that by Thursday, those who want to get vaccinated, ages 12 to 16, will be able to do that as well. So we're really excited about that. Thanks for the question, Rachel. Next up, we have Lisa on Facebook who wants to know if and when I will enact a ban on vaccine passports. So this is something that people missed. We have, of course, a very busy legislative session from January until March. Those 45 days. There's so much happening there. And we have 500 new bills that passed. And one of those bills that I supported and signed into law was a ban on government-issued or government requirements for vaccine passports. So government requiring vaccine for travel in the state, government requiring vaccinations for education purposes or for gathering purposes for events. We passed that ban on vaccine passports very early in the legislative session. In fact, we were one of the first states to actually do that. And so that may have been missed. That the government can't and won't allow. We will not allow the government to require those vaccines. Now, that does not apply to private businesses. Private businesses can do that. I'm a big believer in the free market. As a conservative, I believe that businesses should be able to make those decisions, just as I was opposed to government regulations that required businesses to do things that they were opposed to for religious beliefs. The famous case about baking cakes for LGBTQ weddings or things like that. Again, I think that should be left up to businesses to make those decisions. I believe the same thing when it comes to vaccines. We believe in freedom in our country, and the businesses have the freedom to make those choices. I suspect that most of them won't. Again, as more and more people get vaccinated, we're certainly seeing that cases are coming down. What we've seen in Israel, I think, is very instructive. So Israel is ahead of us in vaccinations on the vaccine curve. They've been able to get more of their citizens vaccinated, and what we've seen is COVID hospitalizations and deaths and even cases have almost disappeared completely because they've done a good job of that. So I encourage everyone to get the vaccines, but just know that the state of Utah, I will never mandate or require that people get those vaccines. So thank you for that question. I'm glad we were able to get that ban on vaccine passports done early. Okay, let's go to the next one. This is Amanda. I'm interested in what is being done to enhance and expand access to rehabilitation programs within our prison system. I know COVID-19 has halted many of these, but also know that access is limited regardless of the pandemic. Someone that I love dearly is desperate for help, and I wish I knew what steps I could take to help encourage positive change. Thank you, Amanda. It's a great question, and you're right. Because of COVID, and especially in congregant living facilities like we have in our prisons and jails across the state, it's been very difficult to deliver some of those programs that are so desperately needed. And of course, we wanted to keep prisoners and staff safe as well. We're very excited. As case numbers continue to go down, we're opening those back up. We had several announcements that in June, the beginning of June, which is coming up quickly, that we will have volunteers and religious services and some of those programming coming back into the state prison. So that's going to help. The programs that you've talked about will also be coming back into the prison. We also worked on legislation this year that will improve access to education in our court system and in our criminal justice system. We know that almost every single person who goes to jail or goes to prison is going to end up outside of jail. Unless you have a life sentence, you're going to end up outside of jail at some point, which means you're going to be back in our cities and our neighborhoods. And we want to help people overcome whatever challenges they have, to get that rehabilitation that you talked about, to give them opportunities to learn, to get an education, to become better people and better citizens. And that's one of the reasons, actually, that we're building the new prison. And the new prison is coming along very well. It will be opening next year, and I'm excited about it. The whole design of this prison is very different. It has many spaces for these types of programs that you're asking about, and we believe it will make a huge difference in helping people to rehabilitate and to get back into society. So the good news is there's more and more of that happening all the time, and we hope that will improve outcomes and reduce recidivism so people don't end up back in prison again. But thank you for that question. Okay. Next, we have a question from Brittany on Facebook who asks, is Utah going to follow suit and become a Second Amendment sanctuary state? Thank you, Brittany, for that question. What I want to say is I believe and I feel strongly that Utah is not just a Second Amendment sanctuary state, but it's a Constitution sanctuary state, that every part of the Constitution is critical to who we are. We believe in it. I believe that the Constitution is inspired. I believe that it is the greatest governing document in the history of the world, and we want to protect it and we want to defend it. And there are lots of different ways that we do that. But one way is that we work very closely with the Attorney General. And anytime we feel like the federal government is violating the Constitution or overstepping their bounds, we bring immediately action against the federal government. We've already filed several lawsuits, joining often with other states against the current administration to challenge some of those actions, some around energy development and others that we feel are unconstitutional. And I assure you that we will do the same thing around the Second Amendment. Now, we have talked with legislators and others about what that means specifically around the Second Amendment, and those discussions are continuing. We want to be careful not to fight constitutional violations with constitutional violations of our own. And so we want to make sure that we are also abiding by the Constitution with whatever we do. But I will say stay tuned on that, as you'll see a great deal of action anytime we see overreach from the federal government. Okay, let's see. We have a question from Noel on Facebook. Is critical race theory going to be taught in our schools? Thank you, Noel. I've been asked a lot about critical race theory. Critical race theory means a lot of different things to a lot of different people. I've asked different people what they mean by critical race theory. And I know it's a specific theory. Back in the 70s, I think, is when it was starting to be developed. It is controversial. From what I know about it, there are several pieces of it that I disagree with. I know one of the things that many people are worried about is any type of teaching that one race is superior or better than another, and certainly that is, we don't believe in that. Of course, that violates the very foundation of our country and the things that we hold so dear, and the American ideal. And so what I can say is that no, critical race theory will not be taught in Utah's schools. Now, we will teach history, and that's important, and we will teach all the pieces of history. We will teach that America is the greatest country, I believe, in the history of the world. I believe that we have changed the course of the history of the world, introducing this idea of self-government, which is so important. We have rescued the world in world wars from evil. We are the American dream is a real thing and has inspired so many generations of people, and that needs to be taught. We need people to understand the origins, this grand idea that we embarked on over 240 years ago, again, that changed the history of the world. We have to teach American exceptionalism, and we absolutely should. At the same time, we also have to teach history and the flaws. We are a flawed country. We have made mistakes along the way, slavery being the largest of those. And I think it's important, it's been said that those who fail to learn from history are doomed to repeat it. And I want to make sure that our kids learn from history, that they learn the good things as well as the bad things that are part of our history, so that we can continue to be a great country. We don't hide from those things. We teach the very best of who we are. But any type of theory or flawed teaching that would say otherwise, we want to avoid that. And so I suspect that we'll be hearing more. Again, usually curriculum decisions are made at the local level, and that's a very good thing. We want schools to be influenced by their local school boards, which are just parents and educators and community leaders who come together to serve the community. Obviously, the state board plays a role in that, and the legislature does as well. So we'll be meeting with the legislature to see if this is an issue in the state of Utah, something obviously that people are concerned about, and make sure that we deal with it in an appropriate manner. So I really appreciate the question, and I hope that response is helpful. Okay, we're still going. Let's see, we've got several questions that have been submitted. This is another one that came on Facebook. What's it going to take to start seeing bipartisan legislation? Locally and nationally, everything seems to be 100% polarized. Nobody has all the answers, and nobody is without blame. Ben, I couldn't agree with you more. Nobody has all the answers. I think one of the things that is missing from lawmaking nationally and from politics in general is this idea of humility, that we don't have all the answers. We have our strongly held beliefs, but we should be listening and learning from each other, and not hating the other side, not seeing them as enemies. but seeing them as fellow travelers, fellow Americans who have a different view than us. That's one of the things I learned when I got to the legislature. I was very strident, and I was going to show everyone that I knew everything and that I was right. And I was humbled pretty quickly from my colleagues on both the right and the left as I started to listen to them and learn from them and have empathy and try to understand their situations. I had a very interesting experience with one of my colleagues who was a Democrat, and I had stood up in opposition to something that she was working on, and afterwards we sat down, and I had thought, she was completely out there and totally off base. And as we started talking, what I realized was we both wanted the exact same thing. We just had very different life experiences. Me growing up in a small town in rural Utah, her growing up in a big city here in Salt Lake City, and living in a very different neighborhood. We wanted the same outcome. We just had different ideas of how to get there. And once we sat down and started working together, I could see some merit in what she was saying. She could see some merit in what I was saying. And we actually found some solutions that worked that we could both support. And that was a very rewarding time for me. I know we can't do that on everything, but we can do it on most things, and we can do it more often than you think. Now, I'm going to take issue with your question just a little bit, because you said locally and nationally, everything seems to be 100% polarized. That is very true nationally, and certainly with Congress, it's almost impossible to get anything done these days with bipartisan support, and it's very frustrating. But I will tell you, it is very different locally. You may hear, because the media loves to focus on the more controversial issues that divide us, but almost 90% of the legislation, those 500 bills that I talked about every year, passes unanimously or near unanimously with significant bipartisan support. One great example of this is around policing. And of course, this past year with the George Floyd death and trial and everything that sparked out of that, we've certainly seen that divide, and we've seen outrage, and we've seen some very troubling things that happen across the country. Well, this doesn't get as much attention, right, because it's not as divisive, but we passed here in the state of Utah 12 different bills focused on police officers and their relationship to the community. And they were supported by law enforcement, police chiefs and sheriffs associations across the state. They were supported by community activists, the NAACP and others. It was them coming together. Instead of defunding the police, we actually gave more funding and more training to the police to help them be able to do their jobs better. We had bills, again, with bipartisan support. They were sponsored by Republicans and Democrats together in both the House and the Senate. And I just think it's remarkable. These were bills, again, around training, on how to reduce violence, on de-escalation. There's data collection, so we understand better if the things that we're doing are actually working. Community engagement legislation, all of these different things that passed. And I think it's historic. I think the rest of the nation could learn from us. And so I think Utah can be a really good example of that. Now, if we're not careful, we'll follow that same path, and we'll end up more like Washington, D.C. And I don't think any of us want to go there. At least I hope we don't. And the way we avoid that, it really is up to you and me, every one of us. We have to be clear of what we demand from our elected officials. We have to hold them accountable. I believe that our government and the people we elect are just, I mean, we get what we deserve. They're just reflections of us. And so if we want them to be better, we have to be better. And that means being better on social media. It means not attacking people who are different than us. It means actually trying to listen, not to debate, but listen to learn, and then trying to find common solutions. And having friends and people around us who don't see the world exactly the same way we do. That's how we make it better. That's how we find better solutions and common ground. And I know we can do that, but if we're waiting for Washington, D.C. to show us that, we're going to be waiting a long time. It's going to be up to each of us to make those changes. So anyway, I love that question. Thank you so much. Okay, let's see. From Heather on Instagram. What are you doing to help Utahns combat misinformation spreading in our state? Well, Heather, I'm doing this, and I hope that this is helpful. We're trying to do this as much as possible. Unfortunately, misinformation and conspiracy theories have gotten more and more control over people, and it makes me really sad. I have to laugh. I keep thinking, when are they going to let me in on the conspiracy theories? I thought, maybe by the time I was governor, someone would let me in on that. And I say that jokingly, but many of them, most of them, almost all of them, if not all of them, are not real. And yet, with social media, Facebook and others, we're seeing more and more of those conspiracy theories that spread like wildfire. And so we're really trying to do everything we can to get good information out there, to present people with the truth and facts and let them make decisions. We have a newsletter that we're sending out every week. We would love you to come and join us on and get that newsletter, receive it in your mailbox. It talks about everything that we do during the week, and again, we connect people with good information. And I should probably have a site. Do we have? Oh, it's on here. I should just look on here. Governor.utah.gov. That's where it is. I should remember that. Governor.utah.gov is one place that you can go. And depending on, again, what the misinformation is, for example, around the pandemic, what I would encourage you to do is just talk to your local doctor. You don't even have to believe me, but certainly don't get your information off of Facebook. Talk to a trusted physician, someone with a medical degree, someone who does this for a living and understands this stuff even better than I do. But always go to those trusted institutions and those trusted places to look for information. So thank you for that question. Okay. Let's see. Let's look at, we have one here from an Instagram follower. What is being done to help with the pollution problem? So thank you for that question. Let me back up a little bit when it comes to pollution. So I'm going to say something. You may not believe me, but I promise it's true. And we have all the science to back it up, and the Salt Lake Tribune has even reported this on multiple occasions. But the air is cleaner now than at any time in our lifetimes. In fact, and not just, this was before the pandemic. Now the air is a little cleaner during the pandemic because less people are driving. But the air is significantly cleaner, 30 to 40% cleaner than even just 15 years ago. We have made tremendous strides on cleaning up our air. Most of that has been done with industry. That's where we've seen the largest strides. We are also, what's amazing about that is, so at the time we cleaned up our air the most, we were the fastest growing state in the nation. As the census just showed us over the past 10 years, we have been the fastest growing state. Now the area where we have the most ability, most of our pollution right now, especially along the Wasatch Front, actually comes from our tailpipes. And those tailpipe emissions are very dangerous, especially during inversion season. Now, it's important to point out that inversions happen before pollutions. Inversions are a natural phenomenon where, especially during the winter months, you get cold air that is here, and then a high pressure moves over, and it traps that cold air between the mountains. So it acts like a bowl with a cap on top of it. And anything that rises up gets trapped in there. So of course pollution gets trapped in there. Water vapor also gets trapped in there, and that's what makes our air look so murky. Some of the Native Americans that lived here, the earliest settlers in this region, called it the Valley of Smoke, because during that time, the smoke from their fires would get trapped. And most of what you see, especially early in an inversion, is actually water vapor. It still looks dark and murky, but that's water vapor. But then, of course, pollution grows and grows and grows because there's no way for it to get out. So the question is, what are we doing? We have invested significantly in Tier 3 gasoline, which will help clean up our air. Many of our refineries are now producing Tier 3 gasoline. All of them will over the next several months and next couple years. And as you put Tier 3 gasoline in a Tier 3 vehicle, which is everything after about 2017, that's like an 80% reduction in emissions. It's like taking 4 out of every 5 cars off the road. Of course, electric vehicles are also a big part of lowering those emissions. And so we're working on building out our electric vehicle infrastructure. One of the reasons people don't buy an electric vehicle, they're now as cheap almost as every other vehicle, but it's that they're worried that they won't have a place to charge if they're traveling. So we're working strategically to get electric charging stations across the state so that people won't have any hesitancy to buy electric vehicles, and we'll continue to make progress there. So lots of cool things happen. We have a bipartisan now, it's a few years old, but this is remarkable. Back to an earlier question. We have a bipartisan Clean Air Caucus. Republicans and Democrats, I just met with them a couple days ago, working to improve air quality in the state. It's not a partisan issue anymore. It's all of us working together. So great news on that front. Okay, we've got time for maybe just a couple more. I appreciate you sticking with us. Let's do, here's a quick one from Lorena on Instagram. Can tourists be vaccinated in Utah? The answer is yes. We have never required any sort of identification. In fact, somebody came up the other day and he said, you know what, my dad was having such a hard time getting vaccinated in another state. We actually flew him out here to Utah to get him vaccinated. So the answer is yes, that tourists can get vaccinated in our state. Okay, from Mason on Twitter, says the stimulus and unemployment benefits have helped. And if those enticements are keeping people out of the workforce, then why aren't we pushing employers to stimulate the economy with higher wages? This is a great question around unemployment benefits. So we had at the beginning of the pandemic, the federal government gave additional unemployment. So we have regular unemployment, and then they added on to that. So there are a couple things that they added on. One was they added on a $600 bonus above and beyond what normal unemployment insurance or unemployment benefits were. And then they also extended the length of time that you could receive unemployment benefits. And the whole purpose of this was to get us through the pandemic until our economy could get back to full strength, to help those people who had lost jobs. And it was a very important thing, and I know has benefited lots and lots of people. Unfortunately, or fortunately, right now, the good news is that our economy is back. In fact, we have, according to U.S. News and World Report, Utah has the strongest economy in the nation. We're one of only 2 states that has actually had job growth, positive job growth over the past year, which is pretty cool. And shout out to our friends north of us. Idaho is the only other state that had that type of growth. We now have about 50,000 jobs that are available right now for hiring that need people to come and work for. We have lots of high-paying jobs, and employers are increasing their salaries to try and get more and more people out there. But because of those that we're continuing those unemployment benefits, it's getting more and more difficult for them to find workers. And so you've seen that several states, and this is something that we'll be working on here as well, to roll those back, to get more people into the workforce, to get those jobs, to get back to employment. Again, it worked. We got through the downturn in the economy. We're back to full employment now, and we want to get more and more people engaged. I just philosophically don't believe that the government should be competing against the private sector to keep people out of the workforce. We want to make sure and give them every tool to get back in. And that's the other thing. We have never had more tools available to help people who want to improve their situation. There are all kinds of funding for training, for upskilling, for additional education to really help people get even better jobs and to take the jobs that are available right now. So we're so grateful for the opportunity that we've had to help people, and now we're ready to help them get back into the workforce and get back to those jobs, which will be good for them and good for their families. Okay, Thoughts on allowing mobile sports betting in Utah? This is something I get often. This would be something that the legislature would have to do, and I don't anticipate that that is something that will happen anytime soon. We're pretty conservative when it comes to those types of things, and we've talked about lotteries a lot in the past, and I've always said that lotteries are just a tax on people that are bad at math, and so I don't think we'll see anything quite like that anytime soon. So I apologize for that. With that, I think we're out of time. I hope you've enjoyed this. I hope that this is something that works for you. If it does, if you like it, please leave a comment and let us know if you want us to keep doing these. If not, I won't have my feelings hurt, but I always love an opportunity to connect with each of you. Let me just end by thanking you. Today, we got our our coronavirus numbers that we get every day, and this past week was the lowest week we've had for new cases since I think the 1st of June. And we had fewer cases this past week than we had in one day in December or January, which is just incredible and speaks to the hard work of so many people working again to get vaccines out, to keep people safe, and to keep our economy rolling. We've done that better than any other state, keeping our economy open and keeping people safe. And I'm very grateful to all of you for your work. So thank you for allowing me to be your governor. Thank you for spending time with us tonight. And we look forward to seeing you again in a few weeks.